Jeff again. This is a Photoshop tutorial that I'm going to be working on with you today. This class focuses on motion graphics in After Effects. The thing about After Effects is it's not particularly good at generating content, i.e. generating the images and graphics that you want to animate. You do need to rely on other programs often to generate those images. So this is a demonstration on how you can prepare images in Photoshop for use in After Effects, especially in the way that we'll be using them for this assignment on moving illustrations. This is a quick start tutorial, meaning this is not going to be a slow introduction to all the individual tools in Photoshop. That you can get from the Adobe links that's going to be linked onto this page. That will give you the more step-by-step introduction to this. What I'll be doing is I'll be showing you in this particular tutorial how to remove a subject from the background and to fill in that background. If you continue working with this method, you can continue to isolate different parts. For example, you can also isolate his back knee and back arm so that they could independently move. So we're basically going to try and break this image apart so that there are animatable elements in this. This particular tutorial will rely on these skills. The Quick Selection tool. The Quick Selection tool is right here. The Quick Selection tool basically allows you to paint over something and it's going to visually recognize what you see. If you go outside of what you want to select, then you can hold down Alt or Option and remove that section. And if you want to go back to adding something, you can hold down Shift. So the Quick Selection tool is really nice because it takes really complicated selections and allows you to be able to make fairly quick work of isolating and selecting that image. We're also going to work with layer masks. We're going to work with the mask adjustment tool, the mask refinement tool. We're also going to work with the clone stamp tool. The clone stamp tool, just so you guys know, is over here. The clone stamp tool is, where'd it go? Is right here. The clone stamp tool has an interesting feature. If you, I'm going to highlight my cursor. If you select on something, I'm holding down Alt, and if I click on his face, where I move my clone stamp tool, it samples where his face is and it will make a copy of that. I'm going to Command Z back up so that we're going to look at the clone stamp tool, and then we're last going to look at load selection. So that's 5 different elements that we're going to be looking at. And we'll go through them now in individually in individual order. Okay, so first, what I want to do is what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to remove this character from the back. This character, by the way, is from a painting by William Blake. William Blake is an artist, British artist from the 18th, 19th century. He was a poet and romantic artist, and he was kind of this like spiritual visionary man who had visions and painted these really, really amazing and esoteric paintings about passion and spirituality, and I thought he would be a good choice for an animation project about feelings because he's a romantic. So this is King Nebuchadnezzar, and the story is that he was the most powerful king of Babylon, but power drove him mad, and here he is in the wild with, look at his long fingernails and toes, and he's clearly gone a little nuts. So I really like this as a starting point. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make a selection of good old Nebuchadnezzar. with the quick selection tool, and I want to isolate him from the background and add a layer mask. So I'm going to go up to the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool, as we said, is I'm going to go back to my highlight function. The quick selection tool is a way that you can select things. You can make it bigger and smaller by working on the brackets keys. I'm pressing the bracket keys right to the right of P. That's making my brush bigger and smaller. So I'm going to leave it about medium size. And what I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hold down Shift, and I am going to just go over good old King Nebuchadnezzar as best I can. And make my brush a little smaller so it can fit on his gnarly toenails. And continue on. I'm going to select all of this. That worked pretty well. I'm going to have to go back and remove some elements. You can see the quick selection tool does start making some assumptions, so you do have to go back and correct it. So it's kind of like an AI. It learns from what you do. So I'm actually just kind of going around and painting around the outside edge of this figure. And when I'm done, I'm going to go back and paint on the places that it selected too much. So there I just made the majority of that selection. Now what I need to do is to remove some of this stuff. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, the Alt or Option key, and now it's going to remove selections from this selection. So there, it quickly recognized that. So I'm removing this selection. And there. That's actually not too bad. Actually, I'll remove this little section right here. I think that's pretty good. Oops. Okay. I'm not going to sweat the details too much on this. Oh, there's his beard. It needs to be selected, so I'll add that. So essentially I'm going through, and whenever I want to add something to the selection, I'm holding down Shift. And whenever I want to remove something from the selection, I'm holding down Alt. I think that's pretty good. We got a little bit back here on his haunches that need refining, and I'm going to say that's good. All right, so once you've made a selection, all you need to do in order to make a mask out of it is go down here to this little button, and this basically adds a layer mask. And what it does is it takes whatever is selected and keeps it and removes everything else. Now this is non-destructive. All this image is still there. And if you two-finger click or right-click onto the mask here, you can disable the mask and it's still there. And you can two-finger click or right button click and turn it off. So it's still there. But I can see if I pinch in that it's kind of a little fuzzy. So one thing that I might want to do is to go into to the Refine, Select, and Mask. And this can be brought up in two different ways. First, you should select the mask layer, and you'll see over here in Properties, there's a function here for Select and Mask. You can also go up to here, and you can find Select and Mask there. So I'm going to go to Select and Mask, and that's going to bring up this option. Right now, you have different view modes. Onion skin is going to show the foreground and the background with this kind of transparency, so you can kind of see where it is. Now the problem is I think this is too jagged. So this is going to allow us lots of different ways to adjust it. I know that smooth is a good function that's going to allow us to smooth that out. And you can see as I smooth this out, you can see it's kind of smoothed out a lot of that selection. No, if I have it down here, it'll keep all the kind of jagged edges. So this is going to be pretty smooth. It's not going to be perfect. You always gain one thing, you lose another. Like I could probably go back and adjust his gnarly little toenails here, but I feel like overall this isolates his figure a lot better. There's lots of other functions on here. You can feather it to make it more diffused or work with contrast so it's high contrast, but these are basically some adjustments that you can use to refine your mask. Okay, and I'm going to say okay. So now I think that's actually a pretty good selection. All right. Now, the thing is, I wanted to actually refine and keep some of that background. So I'm going to actually make a copy of this layer. I'm going to select this layer and drag it down here to the new layer button. And I'm going to label this top one Neb, because I can't spell Nebuchadnezzar. And I'm going to do the back one as background. So I'm going to keep Neb, but I'm going to do something to this background. What I want to do is I have refined my selection and I've made this mask and it looks good. But what I really want to do is something called a content-aware fill and try and fill that background. So bear with me, this is going to be a bunch of little steps. So first thing I want to do is I want my selection back. I have a mask, but I want it as a selection. So I'm going to go ahead and select the mask. And I'm going to go back up here and go to Select, Load Selection. And this is going to allow me to say I want to load the background mask. It's called background here. I probably should have called it something else because there's actually a layer called background. So I'm going to take that background mask and I'm going to load it as a new selection. And there you can see the marching ants are back, which is great. So what I want to do is now use that selection to delete this background. So what I'm going to do is actually, on this background layer, I'm going to sit and I'm going to trash the mask. We're done with it. And drag it down to this trash can. And I'm not going to apply it. I'm going to delete that mask. So basically we now have, I'll turn off this top layer, we're looking now at this background. And what I want to do now is I want to get rid of good old Nebuchadnezzar. So now that he's selected, all I'm going to do is press delete. And he's gone. Okay, now this is actually a pretty cool trick. Now that he is deleted, I want to fill it with a content-aware fill. And that is located under Edit, Content-Aware Fill. And if I select that, that's going to show me, it's going to look at the background and kind of guess to see what sort of background you can have. Like it's going to basically do an AI and kind of guess. Is it always right? No. But what it does do is it really cuts down a lot of work. And actually, I think this looks pretty good. So what I'm actually going to do is I say that looks great. I'm going to go ahead and accept it. And I'm going to deselect it. You can see there's a little ghost edge here, and I think we're going to fix that with a clone stamp tool. But overall, this is pretty good. You can see that if we have our figure here, that we could potentially move him a little bit, animate him a little bit, and with this background kind of all intact, you'd be able to see him moving around in front of that background. So first thing I would do is I needed, it made a content-aware fill as a second layer, so I want to join these two layers. I'm going to join those two layers and do layer, merge layers. It's Command E. I'm going to merge those layers. So now this is all one thing. So Here's where the clone stamp tool comes in. I'm going to go and select the clone stamp. For some reason I can't find it. There it is, the clone stamp tool. And what the clone stamp tool, as I showed you, is if you clicked on his face, it would stamp his face elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is actually going to just kind of take some of this background texture and cover up some of this outline that the content-aware fill did not get. You can see that my brush is pretty big, so I'm going to use my brackets to go up and down to shrink it a bit. And here I'm just going to start right here. I'm going to hold down Alt-Option, and I'm going to start right on this crack. And then you'll see as I move my mouse around, it is carrying that crack with me. So I'm going to actually start with this, and I'm just going to brush now. This is not going to like totally fly if you were like a forensic scientist trying to like fake a crime or you were trying to make a really elaborate still photograph. But since we're working with motion, the time is going to do a lot to hide some of these background things. So I'm going to be okay with it not being totally perfect, simply because the motion of motion graphics actually makes it a little bit more forgiving. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually just continuing to select parts of the background that don't have that outline in, and I'm just kind of painting it in until it all starts to blend in a little better. That looks pretty great. Is it perfect? Actually, that little last bit's a little bad, but I'm not going to futz it too much. Again, continuing to sample and just get rid of that line. I think we're almost done. It's like he was never there. All right, so now we see we have Nebuchadnezzar and we have a background copy. Now this right here is perfect to go into After Effects, because now he's a separate layer and the background is a separate layer, so we would be able to animate him separately in the background. All right, that's it.